فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما.
Hey everyone, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Islamic podcast. So today we've reached to verse 21 in the chapter of Maryam. So this verse is coming after where Maryam asks this very important question: how am I supposed to have a child when no man has touched me? And now in this verse is the particular response. And here the angel Gabriel says, قَالَ كَذَلِكَ قَالَ رَبُّكِ هُوَ عَلَيَّ حَيٍّ. So here Jibril is saying to her that this is going to happen. This is going to occur. And that this is something that's easy for God. We shall make him a sign to all people, a blessing from us. And so it was ordained. So one of the things that's fascinating here in this beginning verse is that the angel Jibril is speaking to her and says once again directly that this is what your Lord is going to do. It's something that's easy upon him. And that he's going to make Jesus, Isa, a sign for all people and a mercy from us. Once again, demonstrating a particular attribute that Jesus, Isa, is understood to have, that he's kind and he's merciful to people and to his community. And this is something that's already been decreed. Now here, one of the things I love about Quranic studies and the exegetical tradition is that there's a history of Quranic commentary, that people throughout time and space have commented on these various verses. And one person I want to speak about today is Ibn Kathir. Now, Ibn Kathir, he was someone that I've written a lot about. I wrote my dissertation on him, his life and his legacy. And he wrote this massive Quranic commentary, and he has this particular specialty in Qisas al-Anbiya, or the stories of the prophets. So he was not only a commentator, but he was someone who was a historian as well. He wrote a universal history, and he dedicates a particular part of that history to the various prophets, and that to Maryam, and Jesus, Isa. And in that history and Quranic commentary, he talks about Maryam, and he speaks about the importance of Maryam, and he says in his Quranic commentary, فَخَلَقَ أَبَاهُمْ آدَمْ مِنْ غَيْرِ ذَكَرٍ وَأُنْثَى. So he says that Adam was created, our father, without a male or a female. So he's trying to explain this incident here, where Jesus is born, where Jesus doesn't have a human father. He is someone that seems to be created only from that of Maryam. So he's making an analogy here with that of Adam. So Adam is created also, but Adam was created without a mother and father. وَخَلَقَ هَوَاء مِنْ ذَكَرٍ بَلَا أُنْثَى. So then he says, and Eve, Hawa, was also created, but she was created from a male without any female. So this is once again referring to this idea that Eve was created from Adam, and there's no specific Quranic verse that says that, but this is understood also coming from the biblical tradition. And in the Quran, and many modern Muslim feminists would say, min nafsin wahida. So they'll emphasize that humanity was created from one single soul, both Adam and Eve. But there is a dominant opinion, which is also similar, it overlaps with the biblical tradition, that Hawa, Eve, was created from Adam. Then he continues and says, وَخَلَقَ بَقِيَةَ الذَّرِّيَّةِ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ وَأُنْثَى. And he says that the remaining of creation comes out of a male and a female. And he's saying that Adam, yes, he was created without a mother and father. Eve, she was created from a man, but then there was no female. And then the remaining creation, their children, were created from a male and a female. So everyone after that has a mother and a father. Even if they don't necessarily know them, their origins are from a man and a woman. Then he continues and he says, إِلَّا عِيسَى, except for Jesus, فَإِنَّهُ أَوْجَدَهُ مِنْ أُنْثَى بَلَا ذَكَرٍ. And then he says that except for Jesus, who was created or comes out of a female without any male. So he here is referring to this particular verse where Maryam says, hey, how can I have a child when no man has touched me? And God responds through Jibril saying that this is something that's going to occur. So Isa, in many ways, in the mind of Ibn Kathir, is the opposite of Eve. Eve was created from a man without any woman. And in the flip side, you see that Jesus, Isa, is created from a female without any male. فتمت القسمة الرباعية أدالة على كمال قدرته وعظيم سلطانه. So then he says that these four different groups. So we saw first with Adam, created from a male and a female. Then Eve from a male but no female. Then the remaining creation of people coming from a male and a female. And then finally that of Jesus from a female without any male. All four of these categories are a sign, and they all indicate the power and the complete power of God and his greatness in his authority. فَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرَهُ وَلَا رَبَّ سَوَاءٍ. That there's no God except God, and there's no Lord except for him. So this verse in particular demonstrates the power of God. And this is how many Muslim commentators throughout history understood this. They understood it was a miracle. And this is something that's easy upon God. Just as he created Adam, then he created Jesus. And just as is a miracle that someone may be created from a male or female, from a single drop, and then they become a blood clot and then develop into a full human being. Now, what we see here is that, once again, this idea of parallelism. So this is something we've talked a lot about, the idea that Maryam is told in this story, in the surah, but this starts with that Zakariyya. And Zakariyya, in many ways, develops the plot line. And then Maryam builds upon it and is unique. So if we look earlier in this chapter in verse 9, we see the verse says, قَالَ كَذَلِكَ قَالُوا رَبُّكَ. So when Zakariyya asks for a child, and then he's told that he's going to have a child, the divine voice and the angel says, this is what your Lord has decreed, in almost the same exact language that of Maryam, except the only difference is the pronoun, Rabbuki and Rabbuka. So when we're talking to Maryam, it's explicit that the angel is speaking directly to her as a woman, where when it comes to Zechariah, the divine voice and the angel is speaking directly to him as a man. And then it continues and says, Huwa alayya hayyin. So this is something that's easy. And that same word is used in the verse of today, verse 21. And then it continues and says, وَقَدْ خَلَقْتُكَ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَلَمْ تَكُ شَيْئًا. And it was easy upon God as he created you, just as you were nothing before. So we see once again a parallelism here, that in this particular verse, Maryam is told that she's going to have a child, just like Zechariah is told that he's going to have a child, that this is going to be easy upon God, and this is something not difficult for him. And then in the preceding, or the earlier verse, we see with Zechariah that the divine voice says, we created you out of nothing. And in the same way, we are going to be able to create Yahya or John. Now, the commentators, however, they focus on this idea of silence. So one of the things I love also about studying scripture is not only focusing on what is said, which a lot of times students and even scholars focus on, but rather on what is not said. So after Zechariah is told that he's going to have a child, he asks for a sign. He says, قَالَ رَبِّ اجْعَلْ لِي آيَةً. So he says, give me a sign that this will occur. And then, as we recall, the divine voice says, قَالَ آيَتُكَ أَلَّا تُكَلِّمَ النَّاسَ ثَلَاثَ لَيَالٍ سَوِيًّا. And your sign is that you're not going to speak to people for 3 straight nights. Now, the commentators, they notice here that Maryam doesn't ask for a sign. That after Angel Jibril tells her that this is something that's easy upon God, that this is amara maqdiya, this is something that's decreed, that this will happen, she is silent. So in many ways, they understand her to accept what God has told her. Where for Zechariah, Zechariah believes that he's going to have a child. He believes in the miracle, but then he wants a sign. He wants some type of confirmation. He wants to do something to affirm that this will actually happen. Now, for many commentators, such as Qurtubi, who is an Andalusian medieval commentator who lived in Islamic Spain in the town of Cordoba, he noticed this silence. He noticed here that Maryam isn't asking for a sign. And because she's not asking for a sign, she has this understanding, this certainty, this faith in God. And this faith is actually greater that of Zechariah, because Zechariah, even though he asked for a child, even though he's granted a child, he still has this uncertainty that this will occur. However, for Maryam, when she's told that she will have a child, she accepts it. And she doesn't ask for a sign or complain about the divine decree. And this demonstrates that the various biblical and Quranic figures, yes, they do ask questions. However, once they are told that a particular event will happen, then they eventually come and accept it. Now, for Qurtubi, he sees this silence as a sign of the superiority of Maryam over Zechariah. So in his mind, he sees Maryam as one of the superior prophets, because when she is told of a command, she immediately accepts it. And she doesn't try to complain or ask for some type of affirmation. Rather, she is someone who is content with the divine decree. Oftentimes in theology and Aqidah, we see many of the scholars try to rank the different prophets. You have the idea of ulul azm, that the superior prophets, the prophets who were patient, like Noah or Nuh, and Ibrahim. And then you have lesser prophets that were known to be righteous, but they didn't necessarily reach to the level of the superior prophets. Then these prophets may be like Salih or Hud. Now, we see here that some of the scholars are ranking Maryam in a higher hierarchy because of her tremendous faith in the power of God. And lastly, we want to see this element of ayah. So one of the things that's unique and remarkable here is that Maryam is told that she is going to have a sign to humanity and a mercy from God. Now, the word ayah is used in other parts of this chapter and the Quran as a whole. So towards the end of the surah, or the end of the chapter of Maryam, it says, أَفَرَيْتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ بِآيَاتِنَا. So it speaks about these people, referring primarily to the Meccans and the disbelievers, referring to the Meccans, that they disbelieve with our signs. And then they say, definitely I'll be granted plenty of wealth and children. How could there be an afterlife? So the idea here is that the disbelievers in Mecca, that they had this conception that they were rich, that they had children, and they didn't need Muhammad's message. They didn't need the Quran and the idea of Islam or submission. And what's important here is that the word ayah is once again used, or our signs. Now, in this particular context, the verse is referring to the actual Quran, the Quran as a sign to all of humanity. And this is similar but different to how the previous verses are used. That we see, for example, Zechariah, he asked for a sign in the beginning, and that his sign is that he's not supposed to speak to people for 3 nights. Then we see that Maryam doesn't ask for a sign, but she's given a sign, and that sign is Jesus and Isa. And then lastly, at the end of the chapter, we see that the disbelievers, they reject the signs of God, which is that of the Quran. So we see that the ayah here is used in different ways. First one is to demonstrate a proof of God. Second is actually a child that is a conveyor of a message. And third is the actual Quran itself as a sign from God and a miracle. So to conclude, we see here once again this idea of parallelism. We see that Zechariah, he is setting the stage for Maryam, but we see a key difference, that both of them are told that they're going to have a child, and this is easy upon God. However, there is important difference is that there's a silence. So when Zechariah hears the news, he asks for a sign to affirm that this miracle is going to occur. However, Maryam is silent, and she actually will go ahead and believe that this event will occur and doesn't need anything additional from God. And we see this idea of sign repeatedly coming in the Quran, that Jesus is a sign and he's a mercy from God. And this sign of Isa is similar to that of earlier in the chapter of confirming a miracle, but it's also similar to that of the Quran, which is understood to be a sign of God. Thank you once again for listening to the Islamic Mary podcast. I encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already. Encourage your friends, students, and colleagues to do so as well. I've been teaching the Quran Bible this semester and been using different episodes as a teaching tool, encouraging students to follow the podcast and listen to the various interviews. You can always email me, text me if you have any comments, suggestions, ideas. Visit my website and join my newsletter to learn more about the publication of the book, The Islamic Mary, and take my quiz on the Islamic Mary, which you can find on the show notes. We already have 50 people who've taken that quiz. Thanks so much for your support, and I look forward to being in touch. Take care.